This is an explosive 9.9 rated novella. You won't stop until the end. Let's begin the story. On the day of my difficult labor, my husband chose to save neither me nor the baby. Why? Because if I died, he would inherit my billions and live happily ever after with his mistress. But I didn't stay dead. I was reborn as the 8-month-old baby in my husband's mistress's belly. I smiled like a devil. Mom, Dad, I've missed you so much. At first, I considered being reborn as a maggot inside that scumbag's body. I could slither and crawl inside him, but then I remembered his habit of eating greasy barbecue 3 times a day. The environment inside him must be unbearable. So instead, I set my sights on the mistress's belly. In a blink, I was their precious son. It's been only a year since they got married, and their son is already 8 months old. Just imagine how many times they secretly met behind my back. I only learned their true intentions after I died. They wanted my fortune. Let's see if they can keep it with their lives. So here I am, an 8-month-old fetus, fully developed with arms and legs, and I'm ready to have some fun. I smirked evilly. I'm still just a baby, so I can be a little mischievous, right? I started to dance like crazy inside the womb. I did splits, used the umbilical cord like a pilot's rope, punched the placenta like a punching bag, and treated the amniotic fluid like a swimming pool in a mansion. It was all about free movement. Ouch! It hurts. Ryan, help! Lu Chen screamed in pain as stars flashed before her eyes. The classmates who were with her froze in shock. Why? Because her belly had morphed into an isosceles right triangle. Was this even a normal pregnant belly? Are you okay? One of them wanted to help but didn't know where to start. That belly looked dangerous to touch. They just stood there, stunned. Lu Chen couldn't speak but cursed them in her mind 1,000 times over. I laughed. What? Now you're angry. When I was in excruciating pain during labor, where were you, my dear friend? Instead, you just sneered and said, "It's just childbirth." Why are you being so dramatic? So now, you're just pregnant. What's the big deal? And this is just the beginning. Lu Chen's terrifying appearance scared her classmates into driving her to the hospital. Doctor, my wife's belly looks weird. Lifting her shirt, even the doctors were stunned. A medical miracle like never before. Everything they studied in medical school was useless now. Even science fiction novels couldn't describe this scene. A pregnant human belly that could shapeshift 1 minute a triangle, the next a square, then a trapezoid, but never round. The doctors figured the baby must have a rigid personality, someone who's not into being well-rounded and was destined to be a judge. But it made ultrasounds impossible. They had to find another method. Then I felt that a round probe was approaching the womb. Wow! A new toy for me! I grabbed the ultrasound probe and twisted it like crazy. Time for some high-speed racing. Nothing could stop my racing dreams. After my wild moves, Lu Chen's face turned pale, almost fainting from the pain. I had already pushed her to her limit inside her womb, and now this extreme racing was sending her on a one-way trip to heaven. The classmates were frantic. Doctor, please, do something. Save my wife. The doctors wanted to help, but how could they? I was still tightly holding onto the probe, treating it like my toy. Maybe your child thinks it's a toy, one doctor suggested. The husband thought he misheard but trusted the expert. Suddenly, he started to think his child might be not the brightest. Sensing the atmosphere, I felt I should do something else. So, I flashed a grin at the ultrasound probe. The doctor performing the scan burst into tears. Why does it look like Ultraman? On the screen, an Ultraman face appeared. It was me. My expression seemed to say, "What's the big deal? It's just Ultraman." If I knew more characters, I'd definitely give you the whole Ultraman family. What is going on here? The husband had gone from shocked to downright terrified. And who could blame him? How could a human give birth to an Ultraman? It was a cross-species phenomenon. The doctors were at a loss, their faces filled with doubt about their career choices. One couldn't help but wonder, what strange things have you been up to with other creatures? Maybe it's our equipment. You should go to a higher-level hospital. That was clearly a polite way of saying, get out. Terrified, the husband begged, Doctor, you can't give up on us. Even Lu Chen struggled to sit up and cried out, "Please, save my baby." Oh, that tearful voice was music to my ears. Crying for mercy, are we? When it comes to Lu Chen, that wretched woman, my blood boils. I once treated her so well, picked her up from the streets when she was down and out. She claimed to be an abandoned illegitimate child, and with my bleeding heart, I treated her like my best friend. Everything I had, she had too. And what did I get in return? A snake in the grass. She took everything from me, even my man. Oh, excuse me, he was hers all along. It was all a setup to make me think I'd found true love, only to lose everything in the end. I fumed. Since I'm dead, there's no way I'm letting you to live happily ever after. Fueled by my rage, I started to wreak havoc. Lu Chen was in such pain that she passed out, lying on the hospital bed as if she were already dead. Ryan rushed over to check on her, but I found his concerned face repulsive. Suddenly, I noticed a fibroid in the uterus and had an idea. Time for some slingshot fun. I used the umbilical cord to create a makeshift slingshot, pulled back, and bam, hit Ryan right in the eye. He screamed in agony, but that wasn't enough for me. I took aim with the largest fibroid, stretched a slingshot as far as it could go, and bullseye, right where it hurts. Ryan collapsed, clutching his groin. The doctors rushed over, shaking their heads. "It's over. There's no saving him," they sighed. Then one doctor took Lu Chen's hand, saying solemnly, "From now on, you'll be like sisters." Since the classmate had transformed into a seductive and enchanting figure wearing a pink dress, high heels, and death Barbie pink lipstick, and to top it off, there was another woman by his side, engaging in all sorts of intimate gestures. This shocking scene left Lu Chen reeling with dizziness, and soon, a fight broke out. It was a one-woman vs 1.5-woman battle, and the outcome was clear from the start. But to me, it was all so boring. We're all sisters now. Why fight? Think bigger. In a few years, won't you all be doing square dancing together? Hearing this, Lu Chen screamed in a frenzy. She couldn't accept that her beloved man had become her bestie and now had another sister to boot. Suddenly, I felt the tightening of the womb. Oh no, this is a time for the birth. I quickly shouted, "Attention everyone, Lu Chen is about to give birth. But what pose should I use to come out?" First, I asked my buddy, the placenta, "What do you think?" Placenta answered with joy, "Life is about having fun. When I come out, I'll be spinning like a top." The amniotic fluid chimed in, "I'll create a water gun celebration." The umbilical cord added, "I'll style myself into a beautiful bow." As for the often overlooked meconium, it was a bit lost. "I'm not sure what I should do," I suggested. "Why don't you lead the charge?" Without hesitation, the meconium shot out at 380 miles per hour straight into Ryan's mouth. Ryan froze. What had he just eaten? The new sister next to him cautiously said, Your mouth, it's a little dirty." Ryan touched his lips and screamed. I immediately commanded, "Meconium, he's opened his mouth wide again, fire all you've got." With that, a barrage of meconium bullets rained down on Ryan, who nearly lost his mind. "Lu Chen, are you out of your mind?" Lu Chen was in too much pain to speak. She weakly muttered, "My belly." Ryan's eyes lit up. "Is it time? Is our baby finally coming?" Completely ignoring his filthy mouth, he rushed to the hospital with Lu Chen in his arms. I sneered. Of course, it's a child of his beloved woman, and the treatment was completely different. When I was pregnant, he didn't even know the meaning of the word care. He even secretly tampered with my food, leaving me weak and nearly dead. Right before I gave birth, Ryan and Lu Chen had plotted to kill me. Women giving birth are already 1 foot in the grave. If we mess with her, who's going to find out? Give birth to your own child, and then we'll swap it out with hers, claiming it's the child of the late you away. Then we can inherit her fortune, and when the child grows up, we'll tell him the truth that we're his real parents. It was a perfect plan. No wonder Ryan had been so adamant about sending me abroad to give birth, claiming the technology there was better for both me and the baby. I must have been cursed to agree with him. But I had one question. Are you sure this baby will be born at all? The placenta and the umbilical cord were worried I was contemplating suicide. If you're going to do it, count me in. I could strangle myself with this cord, the umbilical cord said. Placenta added, I could spin myself into oblivion. Amniotic fluid. I'll drown myself. I waved them off. Why would we give up? Life is too beautiful, and we've still got plenty of games to play. How should we play? I grinned. Everyone just do what you're good at. The goal is to have fun. With a quick glance at each other, the team sprang into action. And once again, the doctors witnessed a medical miracle on the ultrasound. There was umbilical cord rhythmic gymnastics, placenta spinning like a top, and the amniotic fluid performing a water vortex dance. It was chaotic. The doctor wiped the sweat from his forehead. Lou, your baby doesn't seem too eager to come out. Lu Chen, writhing in pain, felt faint. Doctor, please help me. The doctor, trying to remain calm, said, Why don't you talk to your baby? Maybe he'll listen to you and come out. Recalling our previous conversations, Lu Chen thought it might work and began to coax me. Come out, baby. I'll get you some yummy treats. Yeah, right. Yummy treats. All you did was feed me leftovers. Come on, baby. If you come out, we'll play fun games together. Play? I've got enough fun right here. After another round of stunts, I realized the oxygen in the womb was getting low. I figured I'd take a breath, so I poked my head out. The doctor was thrilled. We see the baby's head. Push. Lu Chen, push. But I shook my head and thought, oops, my bad, and quickly pulled my head back inside. Out came a foot, then a hand, in then out, back and forth. The doctors and Lu Chen were bewildered. What kind of child is this? Ryan, clueless as ever, cheered from the sidelines. You've got this, honey. I glanced at Ryan's open mouth and grinned. It was time for another attack. Meconium. Ready, fire at will. The USS Meconium, launched my payload straight into Ryan's mouth. He screamed in agony, and I rubbed my hands together with excitement. Where should I start? Looking back on my history with Ryan, I can only say that I was foolish back then. I thought he was my Prince Charming, always so thoughtful and caring. It turned out I was just a stand in a walking ATM. He needed money for a house in his hometown. I gave it to him. His aunt was having a baby. I paid. Even when he said a family pig was having trouble giving birth, I sent money. I was blinded by love and completely brainless. Whatever he said, I believed. In the end, sweet words are nothing but poison. After a while, I realized Ryan didn't love me, but I thought I could win him over with my persistence. Looking back now, his heart was pitch black, and I was nothing but a fool. Just look at how he treated Lu Chen. She almost died giving birth to his precious son, but when the doctor said she needed to be transferred to the ICU and it would cost $10,000 a day, he hesitated. Despite the fact that she had insurance, and despite all the money he had stolen from me over the years, he couldn't bear to spend a dime. Instead, he said, she told me once she didn't want to be put on life support. She wouldn't want to suffer with no quality of life. It's better to let her go. How touching. Too bad Lu Chen is still alive and rolling her eyes at you. She's not dead yet, and she can hear every word. I glanced at Lu Chen and thought, sis, don't feel bad. Just go peacefully. I'll avenge you. Previously, I felt cramped inside his body, but now, this space is perfect, wide and free, just right for me to fully unleash myself. My first target, his mouth. If it weren't for his sweet talking, how could I have been deceived by him? Now, I have to finish him off. I started with a tap dance on his tongue, making it go numb. Then, I grabbed hold of his two tonsils and did pull-ups like crazy. He screamed in pain, feeling something stuck in his throat. He wanted to puke but couldn't because by then, I had already slid down his esophagus. I began to press on his lungs, stomp on his heart, and play with his stomach. By the end of my round, he was near death. He urgently dialed 911. When he arrived at the hospital, the doctor examined his throat. When he opened his mouth, the doctor was shocked, because there I was, smiling from atop his tongue. The doctor rubbed his eyes, doubting his sanity. How could there be a little person on a human tongue? But don't panic, doctor. I'm not here to scare you, I'm here to deliver a message. I made a few hand signals, telling the doctor that this man was a murderer and suggesting he call the police. The doctor didn't doubt me. After all, if something this absurd could happen, the man being a killer wasn't far-fetched either. So, he quietly reported it to the authorities. Ryan was utterly confused. We came here to check my health, and now the cops are asking highly sensitive questions. Is your wife, Yue Wei, already dead? Can you explain your relationship with her? When was the last time you saw her? Remaining calm, Ryan answered, Officer, she was my wife. She passed away 2 days ago during childbirth. Please, I'd rather not relive this painful memory. Then, he pulled out his phone and showed them our photos together. In every single one, I was smiling, and at first glance, we looked like a loving couple, but it was all fake. Sensing the moment was right, I began to rally the organs inside him. Attention, everyone. Listen up. I gave a detailed introduction of myself, explaining my tragic history with Ryan, how he had betrayed me and led me to my death, even though I was carrying his child. After my fiery speech, every organ was silent, realizing they had been serving a scumbag. They felt ashamed. I smiled, pleased. It turns out, these organs do have a conscience after all. But that wasn't enough. I implanted the idea in them that their master would likely end up in prison. And when that happened, first to suffer would be the Bones. They'd take a serious beating. Bones trembled at the thought, and his close pals, the intestines, shuddered too. Someone even hinted, you might end up, being liked by men in there. The heart was overwhelmed, and the anus screamed, no, please, I don't want that. With no choice left, they all agreed full cooperation. If they wanted mercy, they had to confess everything. So, united, they worked together. Eventually, their efforts formed a single sentence. I am the murderer. I did it. I poisoned her. I deliberately refused to save her. The moment the words came out of Ryan's mouth, he was shocked. How did I just say that? He tried to deny it. But it was no use. I had already seized control of his tonsils, leaving him with nothing but muffled sounds. The police interrogation ended as smoothly as it began. So smooth, in fact, that everyone involved suspected it had been a trap. Mr. Ryan, we'll continue investigating Miss Yue Wei's case. Please cooperate fully. Yes, of course. His organs knew the truth. He was guilty. His heart raced so fast it almost gave out. But even with this, Ryan didn't take it seriously. After leaving the police station, he planned to go back to the house, claiming the baby would inherit my fortune. He had also realized that his voice was under my control, so he started writing instead. With one hand holding the baby and the other holding a pen, he returned to my mansion, writing on paper with deep affection. This is Yue Wei's child, born at the cost of her life. I'm bringing him back to inherit her wealth. The butler looked down at the baby, frowning. Are you sure this coal-black baby is Miss Wei's? Since when did she have African heritage? Ryan was stunned. Why would the butler, who had always been invisible, say something like that? What a fool the butler had known all along. He had tried to warn me about Ryan, but I foolishly gave him another chance. Miss Wei, please be careful while abroad. If anything happens, don't hesitate to use the button by your bedside. Just before I died, I had pressed that button, though barely conscious at the time. Now, I realized the butler knew I had been murdered. I was filled with excitement. Butler, you have to deal with this scumbag for me. Ryan, unwilling to give up, tried to compromise. Fine, if not the fortune, at least let me take some of her things. The butler firmly refused. No one is allowed to touch Miss Wei's money while she's not here. Then, right in front of Ryan, he froze all his accounts. Grinding his teeth, Ryan demanded, at least let me take my personal belongings. Of course, the butler said, pulling up a list of Ryan's items on a tablet. Let's see. The antique vase? Not yours. The Maybach? Not yours. The diamond necklace? Also not yours. After a long search, the butler finally found something. Ah, here we go. When the item was brought to him, It turned out to be a pair of pink underwear. Ryan's face turned green. I remembered those were the underwear he bought to seduce me during our wedding. "This is your only possession. Take it or leave it." Ryan was furious. There must be something else. The butler's expression darkened. "In all these years, only Miss Wei spent money on you. When have you ever bought anything for her? You took everything she had, and you couldn't even give her a holiday gift. She tolerated you because she loved you. But now that she's gone, why should I put up with you?" Then, the butler punched him in the face. Ryan, in shock, said, "You hit me? I studied Muay Thai in my younger days. I don't mind brushing up on my skills." Rolling up his sleeves, the butler revealed his muscular arms. Ryan knew he was no match and slunk away, clutching the baby. "I'll be back," he muttered to himself. I laughed. "Not while I'm around." Ryan, desperate, started reaching out to lawyers, looking for ways to maximize his gain from my estate. He even hinted that if they helped him falsify documents, he'd make sure they got a cut of the inheritance. How disgusting. How did I not see how vile he was before? I couldn't let this slide. "Any thoughts, team?" I asked my organs. Due to the havoc we had wreaked on him, Ryan had taken so many anti-inflammatory drugs that his heart and kidneys were weakened. We were outnumbered, but we had one final strategy. The intestines, still on the front lines, volunteered. "I'll start by playing dead." Brilliant. I immediately rallied the bladder and small intestine. This time, we all worked together. "Let's finish him off." After a pep talk, everyone sealed themselves off, shutting down entirely. At first, Ryan didn't notice, but as time passed, he started feeling more and more uncomfortable, constantly needing to use the bathroom but unable to go. It drove him mad. Finally, on an otherwise quiet afternoon, his body gave up. He wet himself in public. A kind stranger rushed him to the hospital, where the doctor, upon seeing him, sighed. "Oh no, not you again." After running tests, the doctor recommended surgery. Ryan, horrified, asked, "What surgery?" As a man, he knew exactly what was coming. The doctor patted him on the back. "Don't worry, I'll make sure it looks nice." An hour later, Ryan, now with a delicate and exaggerated hand gesture, emerged from the operating room, glaring at an old man nearby. "What are you looking at, you filthy man?" he snickered to himself. In the past few days, this scumbag had been incredibly busy. He'd gathered all sorts of shady characters to help him with his final push, to prove that he and I were a loving couple, that he adored me, and now that he had tragically lost his beloved wife, he was heartbroken. Apparently, the plan was to earn sympathy from others. To his delight, his lawyer had even given him some good news. "All the evidence is in place. You're about to inherit all of Yue's fortune." Ryan was so excited he jumped 3 feet in the air. I sighed. "Careful there, buddy. You just had a urethra surgery. Are you sure it's a good idea to get this excited?" Clearly, Ryan had no idea how to express his current feelings. He rushed to the mall and started a wild shopping spree, walking in like he owned the place, saying, "Bring me the best you've got." Back when I was alive, he always pretended to be rich, but he had to hold back in front of me. Now, with nothing to stop him, he unleashed his inner tacky nouveau rich personality. "But, my dear Ryan, you walked into a luxury store. You may want to act a little classier." His loud boasting drew the judgmental glares of the other customers. Feeling insulted, he swiped his credit card like a madman, desperately trying to reclaim his dignity. The organs inside his body were curious. "Why aren't you reacting to what's happening outside?" they asked me. I smiled and calmly replied, as the Buddha once said, "There are things that cannot be spoken of." The next day, Ryan received a call from the butler, inviting him to the villa to discuss the inheritance. His eyes lit up with joy, and he felt a surge of energy. Even the thing he had just had surgically removed felt like it was growing back. "I'll be there on time," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. After hanging up, he couldn't help but laugh, throwing his head back and letting out a long howl. His organs, now fully aware of his true nature, were furious. "Why aren't you doing anything?" they asked again. I smiled. "Did you notice the color of his suit today?" After a moment of reflection, they answered in unison, "Death Barbie Pink." "Exactly," I said. "Focus on the word death. He's walking right into his doom today. No return." Ryan strutted into the villa like he owned the place. By now, he held a pile of forged evidence. The child was mine, and he had even managed to produce a fake paternity test. The most disgusting part, he presented a recording of me, back when I was deeply in love, saying, "One day, all of my fortune will be yours." When he handed over the evidence, he looked smug, practically glowing with arrogance. "Oh, it's no big deal if I don't get the money, but I have a child to take care of. And I can't let him suffer, right?" He even pulled out his phone, showing a picture of me, and with fake tears said, "Don't worry, Wei Wei. I'll raise our child to be just like you, someone who contributes to society." I almost gagged. Since my death, this guy hadn't even spent $10 on a decent photo of me, and now he had the nerve to perform this charade. The butler glanced at the picture and nodded. "Indeed, that's true." Ryan was so thrilled he nearly squealed like a pig. But I knew the butler too well. That look of disdain in his eyes screamed, "Idiot." He wasn't going to play nice anymore. And so, the butler dropped the bombshell. But Miss Wei made a will before she passed. Ryan's head spun, and he nearly fainted. I immediately signaled to the brain to keep him conscious he couldn't miss out on this moment. The butler continued, "Miss Wei said that all of her assets were to be donated to the state." Boom! His vision went black, and he fainted only to be awakened by the blood he coughed up. He couldn't believe it. How could this happen? Simple. Once I realized he was a scumbag and pressed a button to notify the butler, I made sure none of my money would go to him. I even discovered that he could have saved me, but he chose not to. He wanted me dead to claim my wealth. Of course, Ryan denied everything. "What nonsense are you talking about? The child is right here." He pointed to the fake paternity test, but the clever butler had seen through his tricks long ago. "Is that so? Well, I happen to have another paternity test." The butler handed over his own report, revealing that the child was actually Lu Chen's. Ryan was dumbfounded. "This is impossible." The butler smirked. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" And then, from behind the door, a familiar figure emerged. Ryan's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "How could she still be alive?" The butler explained. "I knew from the start that you had bad intentions, so I investigated. I managed to save Lu Chen at the last moment, but on one condition: she had to testify against you." Still furious at Ryan's betrayal, Lu Chen revealed everything. She recounted how Ryan had plotted to kill me, hoping to inherit my wealth. She admitted that she only joined him for the money, but now she was here to make amends. With her detailed testimony, it was clear Ryan was the murderer. At that moment, the police, already contacted by the butler, arrived to arrest Ryan. He didn't even have time to defend himself. In the end, Ryan was sentenced to life in prison for murder. But the worst part, he had to repay all the debts he'd racked up using my credit cards. The creditors, unaware of the truth, assumed he was still married to me, and figured a rich widow like me wouldn't mind the bills. Now that Ryan was exposed, they descended on him like vultures, demanding repayment. "Is that why you stayed silent earlier?" My organs marveled at the brilliance of the plan. I chuckled. Well, of course. Did he really think he could spend my money? Not a chance. He'll have to work off his debt, and even if he's in prison, he'll be stitching fabrics for the next 80 years. As for Lu Chen, though she was spared immediate punishment because of the child, the butler promised that once the child grew up, she too would face justice. But by then, she would have to endure the heartbreak of being separated from her child. Once the case was settled, I took the opportunity to leave Ryan's body. With me leading the way, all the organs followed. They declared, "We can't stand serving this scumbag any longer." I graciously accepted their offer. And so, on a bright and sunny morning, I stretched and gathered all my little comrades, charging out of his body. At that very moment, Ryan, who was toiling away at his sewing machine, felt his heart tighten and collapsed. He wanted to cry out, but his throat had left him. He wanted to move, but his limbs had gone too. His brain told him, It's pointless. This is your fate for hurting others." As his organs abandoned him, he lay in despair, watching as a tiny figure crawled out of his mouth. It smiled at him, and he realized it was me. "You scumbag, now die." He finally understood all the strange things that had been happening to his body. Before he could say another word, he was gone. The guards found him slumped over his sewing machine. How could someone die from stitching clothes? They wondered, but knowing what Ryan had done, they had no sympathy. They bagged his body and tossed it into the trash heap. As for me, I set off on a new journey with my little organ friends. This time, I'm done with love. All I want is freedom. The end.